One of the key pillars of the Metro Bank Girls in Cricket Fund is supporting new coaches or those considering taking the next step with their coaching qualifications. Last year, the fund delivered an amazing 1,130 mentoring hours for coaches of girls cricket, meaning more confident women and men who are able to champion the future of the girls' game in their club. In 2025, the number will increase further, so keep your eyes peeled for updates on the ambitions for the Metro Bank Girls in Cricket Fund this year. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast. I'm Rana, and in part one, you're going to hear Lauren Winfield-Hill give us the inside line on how the retentions for the 100 work. And in part two, you'll hear Katya Witney's interview with Annabel Sutherland, our first part of a broader look into how Australia are ahead of the rest. First up, me and Lauren in part one. Lauren, first up, how's it going? You got a final coming up tomorrow, or is it Sunday?
Sunday, yeah. So we've just been a bit of centre wicket stuff this last week or so. It's a bit weird actually because we haven't played a game together as a group for 3 weeks. It's just that like with the last round games we had a bye, and then it just so happens that we've had a bit of a break. So lots of match replication stuff. But yeah, good. Like the girls are in good spirits. The vibes are high, and I mean, the only thing is obviously losing Georgia Vol to the WPL. Great result for her personally, but not such a great result for Queensland. But yeah, good to go and really looking forward to it.
Big piece of news in the UK this week around the retentions for the 100. I'm going to make a professional confession. I've never really understood how retentions and all that works, not just for the 100, but other leagues as well. So let's start with the basics. So you're allowed to retain 10 of your 15 players, is that right?
Yeah. I also never knew what on earth went on until I was involved in it. So me and you both, mate. But yeah, 10 retentions. And then you've obviously this year there's the direct signing bit that's thrown in there as well. But yeah, 10 retentions from who played last year, essentially. So yeah, that's always like your starting point is, I guess, like you're ranking your priorities of skill set, experience, etc. And the way we sort of do it is you just feel like you try and get the top ones. Okay, they lined up. Who is happy with what they've got, etc. Who wants more? Who else can you snag? And then just work your way basically through order of priority. And that's not always necessarily financially in order. It's just like, as you say, like order of what's required really, skill set wise.
To me, it feels almost quite mean that you have to lose a third of your squad each year. Is it quite difficult on a personal level? Because it's so different to how normal sport operates, right? Especially in England, across sports, but even domestic cricket, county cricket. You don't have this thing where you have to lose 5 players each year.
Yeah, no, it is difficult, and it is. I was only talking about that today with Kirby Short, one of the girls over here that does, she used to play for Heat and does a lot of like leadership and team culture stuff, and we were just talking about how that is difficult, especially you sort of get those players where if they're the real core and they do a lot of the skills, your top 5 and then your top 5 bowlers or whatever, but then you sort of get like your 6s and 7s in the 100 who don't get in very often, or like your sort of 5th change bowler, is if you're not careful, you can basically just churn them over every year. Like they pretty much, you get a different personnel every year because they're not necessarily the first name on the team sheet, but they're still very important and very, very valued, and they're the kind of person that you want. They're the skill set that you want covering if you get an injury or if a certain surface is presented to you or whatever. But if you're not careful, you can sort of just end up churning over 5 different people every year. And your changing rooms constantly changing. You're trying to build something, get to know people, know the characters that sort of complement each other, all that sort of stuff. And it is very different. That is, I guess, the thing about the draft is it is quite hard to just maintain and not lose people that you've put time and effort into.
Do you think it's a good thing for the general competitiveness of the competition? You know, look at the WPL, for example, this year. The table at the moment is amazing. You've got two teams on 6 points and the rest are on 3. It's very, very tight. When there had been concerns that some of the more established franchises might run away with it. Is it quite a good thing for general competition and keeping it spicy?
I think it depends who you ask and what team you're involved in. I think like when I was with the Superchargers, who obviously haven't been as successful as lucky enough to be with the Ovals, is like if you're one of the better teams and everyone wants your players and wants to take your pocket money off you. Um, but if you're one of the weaker teams that need strengthening, then you're very happy about it. So I reckon it's quite individual based on the teams and the makeup. And I guess the thing is, like with the draft, is the way in which the picks come is you almost get inhibited for doing well. You know, if you do well, then you get lower down. So I understand the reasoning for it. They're obviously trying to level the playing field all the time in terms of where teams have finished the year before. But it is quite, it's almost like, trying to take money off the rich. You're sort of hindering people and teams that have done quite well.
From an overall point of view, who's involved in the process? How many voices are there? How early in the process do you start having the discussions? Is it basically as soon as it's done in August?
Yeah, you sort of decompress a bit and reflect. Like obviously last year was really like the difference between probably being in the final and having to play the knockout was the tie at the Lords, and it's like such small margins where you score one more run in a tie and we'd have finished top and gone straight to the final. So, you don't want to pull apart too much because you've essentially, been the second best team in the comp. But yeah, like you have reflections and generally just reflect with players and staff pretty quickly afterwards. Then everything goes quiet for months and months really, and it's only probably sort of just before Christmas, after Christmas, that you start conversations up again. In terms of like the process and who's involved in it, is for us it's obviously JB's the main man. He's sort of pulling the strings of what he thinks. But he's very much, he's very good at using the resources that he's got around him. So he will use, Mibes, the batting coach. He'll use Marshy, the bowling coach. Like he will speak to the analyst. It's not he's not necessarily his way or the highway. It's very much he's really he's keen to get other people's perspectives of who's out there and what we think we need. And then yeah, just comms with like myself. I'll have comms with players. Who are in like the leadership group and around the sort of core, just to see if we're all on the same page. Like, I don't know if every team would do it like that, to be honest. Like, obviously, I've worked with JB quite a lot and we have a really good relationship. And obviously been at the Ovals for a little while now, so even like the leadership group and that has been very much similar each year. So it is a real collective thing, but ultimately JB makes the decisions on who he wants. But he certainly does seek the opinions and perspectives of the other people involved, and then it goes to the board. That's probably the biggest thing to note is that it's not like you just go, yeah, we're looking at this player. I'm thinking of offering this amount of money for whatever. They have to then approve it. So if they go, no, I think she's worth more than that, or I think she's worth less than that, or actually, that's not the direction we want to go. That all comes from a, sort of a director and a board level.
It's interesting. Obviously, there's been a lot of news around the sale of the 100, and the Ovals are now owned by the Ambani family, who own Mumbai Indians, and I believe they're one of the richest families in the world, which is quite a good boss to have, I suppose.
Yeah, pretty sweet, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm just has the process around. Have you noticed anything different so far? I know that officially, I think 2025 is being viewed as a transition year, and 2026 is when we'll really feel different as a competition. Has it been, from an Oval point of view, any different so far?
No, it's been all very. I think probably the key thing to note with the ovals is that it's less than 50% ownership. So, and I guess that was the whole thing with ovals and Surrey wanting to keep, I guess, the final say and keep control to a degree. What that will look like moving forward, I don't know. Like I see in, with all the stuff that's been announced of who's owners, and then they say, we've got certain things that we need to work through as to what that will look like. Um, so yeah, I don't think there'll be too much change just on the premise that it's less than 50%. But obviously, at other clubs that'll look very different. The Superchargers. With Sunrisers, for example, like that's 100% ownership. So that might look quite different quite quick, in terms of how they want to run it, their staff that they may want to bring in, players that they may, I think that probably the key thing to note with the ovals is like Rashid Khan, obviously coming to the Invincibles, and that's largely on that relationship with Mumbai Indians. I know that Faf du Plessis with obviously the Delhi Capitals, and then going to the Southern Braves. So we've seen like real crossover in the men's side, not so much in the women's, because there isn't that real allegiance to a franchise owner as yet. And also the other thing is, I guess in the 100 is not every team is owned by an IPL team. But it'll be interesting how it all sort of materializes, and whether the women's game will end up looking a little bit like the men's game, whereby you're almost contracted to the Mumbai Indians to play in, 3 or 4 leagues under their banner, whatever that looks like. But yeah, at this stage, it's all pretty much same as.
Yeah, on Rashid Khan, I thought it was amazing how Oval managed to bring him in, but not on the top tier
I know,
contract,
yeah,
which is very, very nicely done.
yeah,
Really exciting news for Oval. You'll be playing with Meg Lanning, one of the
yeah,
all-time
yeah,
greats. How excited are you about that?
yeah. Super excited. I think she was a great steal, really, as well. Like, just having a player with that amount of experience and a winner. She's won so much for Australia, and even getting to experience it last year with London Spirit. I think she's a great addition to our group. And I think the other thing to note is like the strategy around the draft is literally blown my mind at times, with like trying to work out with JB. I'm like, okay, well, where do you put them? What gives you flexibility with like a right to match or a draft pick or whatever? So it's like getting the right people in the right places as well. And I think, yeah, Meg was an absolute steal at what we got her for, which also gave us quite good strategy and flexibility with the draft as well, which was important because, you want to keep options open. And obviously leaving that top bracket gives you the most options, because nobody can go above that sort of price bracket. So yeah, really exciting. I was surprised she didn't get retained at the Spirit, to be fair. But yeah, really really excited to have her as part of the group. I think she'll really enjoy. I think the big thing was she wanted to be down in London, like she enjoyed being down in London as well. But yeah, I think she'll have lots of fun. I think the group's in a great place. Some awesome, people and excitable young cricketers, which I think she'll really enjoy. And yeah, like I think it's an absolute steal, and it gives us great flexibility and strategy for the draft as well.
And then one notable absentee for 2025, I guess, is Paige Schofield. She's made her England debut at the end of last summer. Is that
Mm.
just a team balance thing now that Lanning's come in?
Not necessarily. Like, it's all just like I said. It's having that fluidity with the draft, and having options to go in there. I think she's obviously a high demand player at the minute based on last year's 100. Um, yeah, and she felt like she wanted to test herself in the market, but we've still got options, which was the main thing that we wanted to do. It was not a case of not wanting to keep Paige, because she was very much a very high priority on our list. Um, but yeah, sometimes players just want to test the waters, and what's out there. And Maddie Villiers was quite similar. And someone like Maddie's been at the Oval for 5 years, and like if they want to just see what else is out there and just test the water and see what comes back. I think the thing with the draft is it's very much an unknown, and I think some players quite like just seeing what comes back, and other players would much rather the certainty. And the other thing is you can't deny is that a lot of players in the draft quite often end up getting a lot more than they maybe would have got financially. I feel like nobody ever wants to say that out loud, but it's the reality, and it's you got car insurance and a mortgage to pay for, then like that does come into it. We've sort of seen in the past with the draft, some players have raised eyebrows with the money that they've brought in for what they were probably expecting or maybe worth. So there's always that element as well. But I think from a team point of view, you want to give yourself options to keep who you want to keep. And you want that option all the way into the draft as well. Like we feel like we've got multiple possibilities really to try and get what we want.
We mentioned the WPL earlier. We're going to do a bit more on it next week, but there was an amazing game this week just gone involving the UP Warriors and RCB, where the hero with bat and ball was Sophie Eccleston.
Yeah.
So at one point, UP needed 42 of 18, and Eccleston did most of the damage in getting UP to parity. Then in the super over, she conceded just 4 runs. I mean, it's been a pretty good week for England players in general in the WPL. And I know we've made this point before, but there's going to be some change, we imagine, in across the England teams going forward. I feel like Eccleston's batting is something that just could be utilised more. We were talking about Chanel Henry last week. The closest England player at the moment to that Siva Brunt aside, I suppose, as a 6-hitter is Eccleston.
Yeah, I agree. I think the way that like Australia used Georgia Wareham, you could easily use Sophie Eccleston in the same sort of breath and role, really. I think we saw last year in the 100, she was captain and the team wasn't doing that well, and you almost never. It's really hard when you're a captain to elevate yourself, I think, and it almost was like a little bit too late to when she did actually make it up to sort of 5-6. But you looked at the players that were going in ahead of her and you thought she's got to get herself up there. But yeah, no, I agree. It's mind blowing, really, based on the Ashes to the WPL and just the turnaround of performances from players, like star players. Sophie Eccleston's taken an absolute screamer in the field. She's bowled well. She's nailed the super over. Like Nat Brunt is probably, she's absolutely on fire. She's playing the most consistent T20 cricket she's ever played at the highest strike rate. Danny Wyatt's gone really well. Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it, where we sort of didn't see that with the Ashes, and amazing how probably just the weight and the pressure of not being quite the same as an international, especially an Ashes series, and it looks like can almost just go out with freedom and just express themselves again, and that weight and that baggage is almost gone. You sort of seen it's been, yeah, like you say, it's been a great week really for the English players in the WPL, which it's reassuring to know that they still are the best players in some of the best players in the world.
Yeah, I also, at a very, very basic level, cricket's just a weird game, right? And form is a weird thing. Like, you talked about the 100 last year, that game at Lords. One more run and the narrative around the season is different. And sometimes, it's so often with cricket teams, they can not actually be doing that well as a collective, but their star players are sort of bailing them out. And just because someone's in form, that completely changes the narrative. And it just so happened that in the Ashes, England star players all at the same time were just not quite at the level that we're normally used to. And sometimes actually that completely changes how people look back on things. But we always need things to talk about, right? So when a team loses, we talk negatively. We actually had this conversation in the office yesterday about like the men's team at the moment. Like they're just knocked out of the Champions Trophy, but like the margins are so fine sometimes. But then if certain moments go against you, the way people talk about cricket is very different.
Oh, 100%. And you think about, people talk about form, or they're in form or they're out of form. You think about a lot of times people make big scores, talk about hundreds. You've usually been dropped. Like you'll probably, if you make 100, there's very few innings where you think that was chanceless. Like I literally didn't give a sniff. You know, there'll be a close LB that's gone your way, or there's a drop catch that gives you that chance to go on. In batting especially, you don't, if you get a second chance, you're very lucky. But at times, there might be where people take absolute, you get a couple of bad decisions, and then somebody takes a worldy catch, and you think, geez, like my chips are just down here. There could be no difference in the way that you're playing, the way that you feel mentally, your routine, how much the ball's swinging or whatever. It's literally just that split second of luck or a decision or whatever, and the narrative is so different. And I think particularly in batting, you think of a bowler, like if you have an absolute stinker, you generally have another chance to come back. And if you then nail your skill when you come back, you might have been going at 10s or 12s, and you come back and go at 6s and 7s. Like the actual collection of overs is not a disaster. Whereas in batting, a lot of the time is you make an error, and if that is taken by the opposition, whatever way that is, you're done. Your day is, it's all over. So it is, yeah, it is fine margins, but a lot of most high performance sport is, isn't it? And that's why you train and you do all the things you do to try and reduce the margins.
Well, I hope that all those moments go in your favour this weekend. That's it for this week, Lauren. Best luck, and also safe travels, because you're going to be back in the UK.
Yes. See you soon. Get the heating on.
Cheers for joining the show, Annabel. It's really great to have you on. You're joining us from India at the minute, where you're currently playing for Delhi. How's it going out there?
Yeah, it's good. Always, love the experience to be a part of the WPL, and we're in Bangalore at the moment, and had a win last night, which is good.
Yeah, Delhi are top of the table at the minute. Must be pretty satisfying.
Yeah, always good to be winning, and I think we've played at least one extra game than all the other teams. So aware of that, but it's good to be on top of the table, I think.
And there have been some pretty close results so far for Delhi. Particularly, there was one against UP, which you came out on the wrong side of, and then one against MI. The one against MI in particular, that must have been a pretty insane finish to be a part of.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I wasn't overly comfortable being on the sideline watching the run out decisions, but we had a few that went our way, and I think that's part of it. Seems to be a bit of luck involved in the tournament so far, with some pretty tight games and tight calls. But I think it probably just goes to show the quality of the cricket in the tournament so far, and I think it's going to be really tight as we go on in terms of who makes finals, and can't wait. Hopefully we're sort of a part of that.
How are you as a watching on the sidelines when you're either out or not able to play a part in the game in the middle and it's close like that? Are you a particularly nervous watcher?
I would say I'm not as bad as some of my teammates, particularly in the Australian team. I know there's a few girls who aren't very good at watching, but I'd much prefer being out there in the middle than being on the sideline, that's for sure.
Who's the worst watcher you've played with?
Kim Garth by far. She's not nice to sit next to, and when she's next in the bat, I don't think I've seen anyone else more nervous.
Well, you were out in the middle for the first game at UP that was really close, that went down to the wire, and you were named player of the match for 41 not out and 2 wickets in the game. In a chase like that, when it's coming down to the end and you were with Marizan Kapp in the middle, how do you ground yourself, particularly in India when you've got crazy atmospheres and stadiums?
Yeah, I think, it probably comes down to a bit of experience. Having this is my third year playing in the WPL so far. I think nothing really compares to the crowds and the atmosphere, I think, in the games over here. And so I think a bit of experience helps. Played a fair bit of international cricket now too. So that always helps. But I think also just looking at our team, there's international cricketers all throughout our list. So it doesn't feel like you have to rely on any one person. And I think in that chase, Meg batted really well, got us ahead of the break, and then Cappy came out and whacked them, so I didn't have to do a whole lot. It was just kind of able to feed them the strike, and probably got a little bit closer than we'd like in the end, but nice to get over the line.
You say you played a lot of cricket, which is true, but you're still only 23 years old. Do you think being able to play under that kind of pressure, or being at home in those kinds of situations where it is coming down to the wire, is something that is naturally in you, or do you think it's something you've had to develop?
Oh, I'd say it's probably a strength of mine, in terms of like being able to read the game and stay quite calm in those situations when things get a bit tighter. But I think at the same time, you got to sort of live those experiences, and I think be on the wrong side of them to learn from it. And understand when the right time is to take risks and everything that goes with particularly a chase when you're batting. There's a lot to think about, and lots of different I guess variables that you have to kind of take into account, which I think is a bit of an experience thing. But I'd say it's probably a strength of mine, is just able to stay quite level out there, which is nice.
Do you think there's something particular to growing up and playing your cricket in Australia and coming through that Australia domestic system that's helped you develop those kind of skills so early?
Potentially. I mean, played a lot of cricket growing up, played boys cricket. I've got two brothers, so we all played a lot of cricket growing up, just spending time around the game to get a good, I feel like I've got a pretty good understanding of the game, and so I've got a good read of different situations. I think that definitely helps. And played a lot of different sort of types of cricket, boys cricket, girls cricket, women's cricket. So I think that all definitely helps.
There's a perception in England, and it's obviously come to the fore a bit more over the last few months with the Ashes, that players aren't experienced enough with properly competitive cricket when they make their international debuts, compared to Australia players who, from an outside point of view, seem pretty battle hardened at the point that you make your international debuts. From an Australia perspective, what's your take on that, and what cricket were you playing as a teenager that really prepared you to make that step up?
I'm not sure what exactly the reason is behind that difference. I think it's easy to kind of jump to that conclusion when a team's performing really well, and say England, for example, didn't have a very good Ashes series against us. So in those tougher moments, we probably came out on top. But I think it's sort of easy to jump to that conclusion. I think there's a lot more that sort of goes into it, and things can kind of go your way, and you can get on a roll and have some really, really good momentum in series like that, especially the Ashes, where games came around really fast. I think the group as a whole, our Australian group, has done a lot of work in, I guess, the way we want to play, and having a real trust with how we're playing our cricket. I think, probably the depth in Australian cricket is the best around the world, I think, which I would credit that to the domestic structure and just our pathways. I think Big Bash is the best domestic comp in the world in terms of quality of domestic players, I think. Well, it's, I think, been 10 years now. It'll be the 11th year this year. So that's, been the comp that's like the longest domestic comp for women's cricket, which I think, is probably another reason why that people have just been exposed to that kind of bigger stage for longer period of time. But having said that, I think like WPL, the 100, other countries are getting more and more exposure to that kind of high pressure, intense competitions, particularly in short format cricket. So that's a long-winded answer, but lots of different factors, I think, to consider.
No, it's all interesting. But what is it about that level below the WBBL as well that kind of builds that competitive environment?
I don't know. Maybe it's the way that Australians sort of play their sport. I think, in general, pretty competitive. And I know the club system is pretty strong. I think Premier Cricket's in, I can only really speak for the Victorian system. That's where I'm from. So, I know that's getting stronger. Then they're like the numbers and number of teams and those sort of things are always improving. And it's important to keep pushing the level of that club system to bridge the gap between club and sort of state cricket. Try and get that as close as possible. So you're creating competition at club level, creating competition for spots at state level. All of that I think really helps and is quite healthy to then, as you go further up the chain, you get really high quality cricketers.
You mentioned playing in Victoria. You're playing with fellow Victorian Meg Lanning at Delhi, who's captaining. What's it like to play under her again?
Yeah, I played with Meg for a lot of my career, which I've been very lucky to have that opportunity. I think, I mean, speaking of competitive, she's as competitive as you get. I think she's going to do everything she can to get the win or get the team over the line. And she's got so much experience as a leader and as a captain. So her read on the game is as good as you get, I think. And I've certainly learned a lot playing under her, which is nice that still able to do that in comps all around the world.
Those roles were reversed in the WBBL this year with Melbourne Stars, though. What was that like?
Yeah, it was a little bit strange, but nice because I think she was sort of happy to give me an opportunity to captain and knowing that she was going to be there and to help out and certainly lent on her a lot along with some of the other senior players in the side. Definitely felt a bit out of my depth at times, but I think that's part of it when you're sort of a young leader trying to learn on the job. But no better person to, I guess, have in your corner than Meg.
What's, I guess, giving you the Melbourne Stars captaincy at such a young age is one of them, but what systems are there in place in Australia to develop those leadership skills among young players who are tipped to be leaders of the future? Yeah,
good question. I think it's probably something that has changed a bit in, I think, I guess the captaincy role keeps sort of progressing in terms of what actually comes with that job. Like I think previously it used to just be the best player was captain. That was sort of a no-brainer, but there's a lot more that goes with it, with the media work and I think all the off-field side of captaincy. Yeah, I think the on-field stuff is probably the easy stuff. Like people would put their hand up, no-brainer if it was just the on-field captaincy work, but I think there's a lot more to it. So yeah, I do think, I guess, developing your leadership is a really important part of if you want to go down the path of captaining. And I think exposure to doing the role in comps like the Big Bash or domestic cricket, that's one way to develop it. I think Cricket Australia have done a bit of work in terms of exposing potential leaders to programs and different things like that. I think there's quite good funding in terms of personal development. If you want to invest in that for yourself, there's sort of avenues you can go down to get funding to do programs, and there's a lot out there. So I think the responsibility comes on the individual if that's what they want to do in terms of their own development. And I think Cricket Australia are also sort of identifying, always thinking about the future and what it could look like for the next players coming through.
There was something mentioned on the commentary during the Ashes Test match actually about a leadership program in the Women's Australia side. Is that correct?
Yeah, there is a program going on at the moment, which could be wrong here, but I think it's the first one they've done like this. I think there's been ones before, but I think there's a few of us who are doing that, which has been cool. And I think like I said before, it sort of does come on the individual too, to like anything, if there's something you want to improve on or get better at, that you sort of got to I guess identify that yourself and sort of go after it. But cool that that opportunity's been provided.
Even speaking about you in terms of leadership, we've mentioned before, still so young, and you've had a remarkable rise, 3 test centuries already, the joint leading test centurion for Australia women's 3rd WPL season. What's your take on how quickly you've kind of got to the point where you are in the game? It's looked so quick from an outside point of view.
Yeah, it doesn't feel that quick, to be honest. It's sort of been, I guess, 5 years now that been a part of the Australian team. And I sort of look back at the first couple of years where I spent a lot of time on the sideline running drinks, and which I guess at the time was tough. I think it's hard have perspective. Looking back, it's easy in hindsight, sort of understanding the team I was a part of and how successful that team was, how hard it is to crack into the Aussie team, but always sort of looking to improve my game and find ways to get better. All I wanted to do was be a part of the playing 11. So yeah, spent a fair bit of time trying to learn and get better early days and be sort of part of being a younger cricketer. I think you always got to find ways to improve, and it's been nice to have a few different successes over the last 12 months. But no doubt, sort of bigger picture, the 5 years have been lots of ups and downs during that part too.
Given that your family are so close to the overall kind of cricket narrative in Australia, has that kind of helped with, I guess, being a sounding board during that kind of intense time?
I mean, always got to have a really good sort of close circle around you, which I'm lucky I've got great family support and friends too that I can lean on and keep me grounded in different times. I think it's hard at times being a professional cricketer. You spend a lot of time away from home, and there's sort of a lot more that goes into things when you're sort of living it rather than seeing it from the outside. So certainly lent on those support networks throughout, and they've been great for me. I'm very lucky to have my family in my corner, and friends too. Like I said, just keep me grounded and look after me.
And both your parents were in the stands when you scored that Test century at the MCG a month ago. The first woman to score a Test century at the MCG in a Ashes series that was pretty clear by that point was going to be a whitewash, and on your home ground as Victorian. Was that pretty emotional?
Yeah, it was. I think I was trying to be in the moment as much as I could. We were pretty desperate to get the win and sort of be able to come out of that Ashes series to say that we'd won 16-0. So I was more focused on that, doing my job for the team, and it's always nice to contribute, like to get a score like that. And then I guess the bigger picture part of it, that it was at the G, and a ground that I've spent a lot of time at growing up. Cool to reflect on, I think.
Well, cheers for joining the show today, Annabel. It's been great to chat to you, and good luck for the rest of the WPL.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks to the Metro Bank Girls in Cricket Fund and the delivery of 1,130 mentoring hours in 2024, more coaches of girls cricket are delivering brilliant sessions for their clubs and helping to grow the game. If you want to find out more about the fund, visit metrobankonline.co.uk/cricket.